historical storytelling meets humanities, and oh, it was wonderful. It was excellent. And all of the planning, all of the arranging and so forth, it was worth it, of course, and it does help having amazing panelists. So I am very grateful and just excited that we were able to have Dr. Carolise Frink-Reed, that we were able to have Sheila Arnold, that we were able to have Darcy Tucker, and wonderful that we could have Brian Fox Ellis. So wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. And we will continue to plan on wonderful events for Story Crossroads. Now, we're not done for 2020, of course not. We just happen to do some of our biggest things of the year, which would be the Story Crossroads Spectacular, which was on May 13th, 2020, and then what normally would have been the day after our festival, what normally would have been on May 14th, 2020, we decided to push to June 20th, 2020, just so that we had enough time and be able to work out all the details. So that worked out great, and that officially closes Spectacular. Now, anytime we do something full virtual, I think we will always call it Story Crossroads Spectacular. If it is something that's much more live festival based, then I believe that name will be Story Crossroads Festival. So if it's full virtual, it'll be Spectacular, and if it's very much focused on live, it will be Festival. But I have a feeling that next year we have schools already not sure if they're going to be doing field trips, and so because of that, I'm thinking that we may still have the festival portions for next year of May 12th, 2021, and we'll have the Spectacular sections as well. That's what I'm anticipating, but you never know. You never know. And yes, good evening, everybody, and hello to Alan. Glad that you can join us tonight. If you happen to be on, feel free to say hello. And just celebration. Alan, you were able to celebrate and enjoy the Big Y panel. That really was exciting to be there and hear from those amazing people. Now, you have to know that right before I streamed that panel, I was really kind of hyperventilating. And I do love the spotlight. I do love putting on events. I do love performing. But I get these butterflies, and if I don't tame those butterflies, it's gonna go zonkers. And if I happen to eat just a little bit too much and it mixes in with the butterflies, then certain things can happen. And I was nervous. I was not nervous at all for the panelists, but when there's so much tech involved, I wanted to make sure I pressed the buttons at the right time. And things weren't perfect, and I was able to see for myself of things that, maybe I would do this a little differently or that a little differently, but it was really about what I would do and not anybody else. And when it came to the live events, it's so easy to kind of be there. Yes, it takes a lot of physical strength and you're setting up and taking down, but a microphone, just a microphone, plug it in, so much different than when you're streaming or you're using Zoom or you're trying to put in blurbs from a Google Doc to then put into the Zoom or to then put into the multi-streaming to then send out to everybody. It's a lot of multitasking, and it's nice for the live event to just focus on really the one thing, running it versus all the tech stuff. Usually I have other people run the tech stuff. Even with Story Crossroads Spectacular, I wasn't the one really running the tech. It was Sterling and the other videographers. They were the ones that were making sure everything was syncing. And so there was a little bit extra pressure, but hey, and thanks, Alan. I'm glad that you thought that I did good. It felt great. It's just that I know right before I pressed that button, I had to breathe. I had to do some deep breathing to be ready, and we didn't even start on time. It was supposed to be 9 a.m. Mountain Daylight Time, and guess what? We streamed at 9:02. We were 2 minutes late, and we could have been on time, I know it. But it still was great. We ended pretty much on time as well. So we were going to go to 10:30 a.m. Mountain Daylight Time, and we ended up going 4 minutes over. So We started 2 minutes later, so basically instead of an hour and a half panel, you got a bonus 2 minutes. You got an hour and 32 minutes. How's that? Every little minute that we want to soak in and get all that knowledge from those panelists, right? So you'll forgive me if we didn't exactly end with an hour and a half. But still, it was tricky because we had a lot of questions. There were so many questions that we could have gone into, but what I was pleased with is that we covered all of the humanities questions, almost all of them. Maybe there was one or two, but almost all of the humanities related questions were answered, which, considering that this was being funded mainly by Utah Humanities, very important to have those questions answered. And then we were able to find out in the moment from people of what they were interested in. Now, it wasn't surprising that a lot of people were interested in the how, but since it's called the Big Why, we had to veer more that way. However, it was nice, just by listening to the why, I think we naturally heard some how. So I believe, Alan, that you were still able to glean some things of what you were hoping for as well, besides the big why. And I loved all the back and forth comments. Now, I was able to see all of the comments, all of them. So I could see people responding from Twitch, I could see people responding from YouTube, I could see people responding from Facebook. And it was wonderful to see all that. And then I had to remind myself that not everyone was seeing everyone else's comments. And part of me was saddened by that, because everyone had wonderful comments, whether it's applause, which is a wonderful thing to see or read, whether it's clap, 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 or the emojis that are clapping, but also some of the memories and moments that were triggered for people. There were a few times that within the panel, it was talked about history and how history was a hard subject for a lot of people because it depends on their teacher, depends on if their teacher was story-based in their presentation. And there were some wonderful comments that way. I did notice that most of our comments did come from Facebook. In fact, the majority of our audience during the live stream of the Big Why came from Facebook. So during the live stream itself, in case you're curious, we had 50 people, which was wonderful. But what's amazing is what happened a few hours after the live stream. So during the live stream itself, we had about 10 people on Twitch. We had about 16 people, a little bit back and forth sometimes on YouTube. And we had about maybe 24 people that were on Facebook. So that's your breakdown of what it was. The lovely thing is when I would look to see how many people were in each of the platforms, it was pretty consistent, and a lot of people were on time. So that's wonderful. It always has the most people at the 3-minute mark, and I noticed that there was a surge at the 15-minute mark. I think part of it's because there's the people who are planning on the streams, and then there's always the people who stumble upon it. And that the 3-minute, 15 minutes, it's not just for the Big Why panel. I have noticed this for like everything, for anything that is streamed. Even when I'm streaming these things, it's the 3-minute and the 15-minute where there's a little bit extra surge on that. So fascinating, fascinating. But within a few hours of the stream itself, we actually had 230. So you go from 50, a couple hours later, we already were at 230, which was exciting. But you probably were wondering, where does that come from? Well, we had 10 to begin with the Twitch, and then suddenly we had 11. Woohoo! But YouTube, instead of 16 in the live stream, it then bumped up to 30. So that almost doubled for YouTube. But Facebook is fascinating because in the live stream we had 24 constant people, but a few hours later it was 189. So Facebook was the big winner when it came to the Big Why panel. I find that interesting because when we had the Story Crossroads Spectacular with the festival, and because we had the virtual field trips, YouTube was our biggest one. Those were where we were getting the triple-digit numbers. And I think it's because depending on the school district, either Twitch or YouTube are usually encouraged. Facebook is usually banned by schools. And so it doesn't surprise me. You get a lot of adults on Facebook, and since the panel was more academic, then I believe that drew in more people from Facebook. So very fascinating. This is why I really believe multi-streaming is the best way to go if you're doing virtual events, unless your audience is one way or another. So if I was doing a storytelling festival, I would say that YouTube was the biggest and most important one, if you had to only choose one. But if you were doing something academic or focusing much more on adults, then you would probably focus more on Facebook as being the big one on that. But I do love Twitch. I've had some people that when they try Facebook or YouTube, they have a little bit of a tricky time to get on. But Twitch is very easy. I'm sure, Alan, you can agree with me. Twitch is so easy. You don't have to search around and wonder where that stream is. You just go to the channel, which for us it's twitch.tv/storycrossroads, and then it streams and you're there. You don't have to worry about searching around like I feel like you have to do with Facebook and with YouTube. So I'm still a Twitch fan, even if we have lower numbers there, but bit by bit it's coming. And when we first started Twitch, you have no followers whatsoever, and then we get a couple followers, and now we at least have 27 followers, I think, if I last looked. So we're growing, we're building there, and but I was really happy that we multi-streamed. Now the big question for Story Crossroads is, do we continue to pay the monthly fee of multi-streaming? When we had the last board meeting with Story Crossroads in June, and that's when we were celebrating Spectacular, we discussed that, and as a board we decided that we would at least do multi-streaming one more month. And that way we could possibly end it and save about $40 a month if we ended it. And then we could multi-stream again when we got to our bigger events. And our bigger events are more your May, possibly June time. So maybe only a couple times a year will we truly buy that monthly restream, and we may let it go and still do these, but then they will only be on Twitch. So we'll see. But that's probably where we're leaning, because instead of spending the money for the multi-streaming, we might be switching that money over to a ticketing system that costs about the same amount per month, about the $40 a month. And being that we need to have RSVPs required for house concerts, I think that will be a really good idea. But now going back to the Big Y panel, it was a lot to juggle. If you're doing virtual storytelling, I don't understand how anyone can do it with one screen. I know it's possible, but I know with what I was doing, there's certain documents I have to see. Now I can always print the information from my Google Docs and not have it be a live document, but I guess I like having it as a live document. You want to know why? It's because I can multi-stream comments, and there's certain comments that I will want to share for sure, such as the bios of the panelists, such as the link for the feedback form for the Big Y. I would need to put out there about the names of the panelists and things here and there. And if I have a Google Doc, I can copy and paste instead of having to type it really fast. If it's a hard copy, I can't suddenly put that into the chat. And I like having one screen that is my Zoom screen, or my screen that is for OBS, depending on what I'm doing. Right now, when I'm doing streams right now on Mondays, I'm using OBS. But when I did the Big Y panel, I was using Zoom and multi-streaming out. I learned something though. When I went into Zoom, the day of, here it's 30 minutes before we're supposed to start, and I couldn't get my video to start. I'm like, well, wait a minute, I've done so many test runs, why is it not working? And it's the simplest thing, and you think you do the things the same way from the test run. I didn't. What I had done was I had opened OBS first, and then I open Zoom. And because I open OBS, OBS likes to use my built-in camera with my laptop. So my camera technically was being used by OBS. So when I wanted to use it for Zoom, it kept saying, you can't do it, you can't do it, you can't do it. And I'm thinking, well, I guess I can still host and moderate without people seeing me. These are the things that are going in my mind as it's tick-tocking down to the actual time of this event. And then it was, oh, wait a minute, let's see if I can close OBS and try Zoom. So when I closed OBS and then I opened Zoom, I had no problem in having my video. And then I had a big whew. People could see me. They don't have to see me for the panel. It's really important for the panelists and the American Sign Language interpreters to be seen. But still, yay, I could be seen. And the OBS, you might think, well, if I'm not using it for the video, then why would I need the OBS up? It's because for me, it's easier to pull up the Restream information. Restream loves to connect with OBS. It can also connect with Zoom, but I like it connecting to OBS, and there is the, with the comments, for some reason, it wanted me to log in if I didn't have OBS up, but if I have OBS up, it's automatic. I don't have to do those extra steps. So once Zoom was up, my camera was working, I was able to have OBS up and not cause a problem. And instead of showing a video on OBS like it is right now and broadcasting to you right now, it was simply black. But that was okay. I didn't need it for multi-streaming from Zoom. So little things that I learned that was a little bit of a panic moment when coming down to that. So, oh boy, glad it all worked out. But really, if it was ideal, I would have at least 3 screens the next time I do a panel virtually, because I had so many things I had to have ready. I had the opening and ending credits. They were videos. These videos were through the same software. But in order to share your screen in Zoom, they have to already be up somehow. They can't just be on your desktop, as a file. They have to really be opened, and not simply as minimized, but there. But I noticed that I couldn't have 2 videos open. So I could have the first one open so that I could play it at the beginning. Then I had to remember to close it out completely so that down the road I could open up the other file with the video for the ending credit and make sure that I still was paying attention to what everyone was saying and being able to transition between people. And on top of that, be reading comments and responding. Now, Alan, you were there so that you could see that I was doing my best to not only do the normal things to put in the chat, like here are their bios and such, and remember to fill out the feedback form, but I did try to mention or say yes to certain people's comments of what they were saying. So that was really fun, and really tested my skills there. But yes, and it happened. I was able to do it, yes. And of course, the panelists were wonderful. I knew Dr. Reed would be perfect to set the scene. She does have that library background and history, and it showed as she really explained that Chautauqua historical storytelling world. And she even reminded us of so many different names that kind of storytelling would go by, whether it be reenacting or living history. And she mentioned a whole bunch of names, and she even did more than what she had to do. She actually interviewed some people from the Chautauqua world just to confirm things. She didn't want to get it wrong. And she also watched a movie that had Elvis Presley in it, that was a movie that was focused on a little town that had a Chautauqua community. And that was something that wasn't really brought up, except for maybe a one line in the panel itself. But but then she had that extra confidence with her on that, which was nice. And I knew that she wasn't a performer of historical storytelling, but she was very familiar with history, with the storytelling scene. And it was also fascinating to hear her responses to things like, how does folklore and historical storytelling connect? And we also were able to hear from Sheila Arnold and from Darcy Tucker and Brian Fox Ellis. They each did a little bit of a historical piece, maybe about 3-4 minutes possibly, but it's amazing how powerful they are in 2-3 minutes, that you barely met this other person from another time period and you already feel like you know them. That's how it was like for me. Is that how it felt like for you, Alan? Is that how it felt like for you? We had One Judge, which I had to practice how to pronounce that because it's spelled Oney. And so the first time I saw this typed to me from Sheila, I thought, oh, it must be like oney. It looks like it's oney because it's Oney. But when I double checked with her, thank goodness, before we actually recorded this and streamed it, I learned that it was pronounced One. But she also admitted that even though most likely it would be pronounced that way, that it could be pronounced a different way too. We don't know for sure. But the most common way when it is spelled Oney was One. So I made sure to say it. I said it correctly, One Judge, who was a maidservant of Martha Washington. And I don't want to give it away because you should really be watching it. If you didn't watch the panel, you need to watch it at storycrossroads.org/thebigwhy. And it's very moving, and I'll leave it at that. But it was amazing. And then we had Elizabeth Thompson, a Loyalist spy, and a lot of people, and we got comments from the attendees, said that they could understand these valid reasons that she did what she did. That yes, there are the patriots with our history with the United States of America, but the Loyalists, they did have valid reasons, and there were certain rights they were used to in England, and they were not sensing or feeling like that was happening for them. So it's I'm really going to have to study that a little bit now. Have you thought about doing a big how? You know what? Funny enough, that would get us in trouble, because sometimes, depending on how you say certain words, could get you in trouble culturally or politically. So, besides, there's a lot of workshops that are about how to do storytelling, but there's not that many that delve into why. And you might say, well, wait a minute, keynote speakers tend to focus on the why. But it's more motivational versus a panel where instead of being motivational, it's an academic. It's more of a discussion than what you would get in a keynote. But it has come across my mind, Alan, about if it would be better to be a big how, but it's really more a big why. So in time, this was our very, very first one in this series. This is not the first one, but they will all start with the big why. So the next one, I'm not sure which one we'll do next. Maybe you can vote and let me know what you think would be more fun to do next. But there's so many kinds of storytelling. Like tall tales are fun, or jack tales would be really fun. Pourquoi stories, creation stories. So we could have the big why, creation stories meets humanities. Or the big why, tall tales meets humanities. You notice the theme, the big why, and at the end, meets humanities. Because humanities is very much about a discussion of the arts. And they go hand in hand. That's why so many times in the same breath you say arts and humanities. They go hand in hand. And I have to be very careful when working with humanities groups, because if you only focus on the performance, which would be the how, if you only focus on the performance, then that's not actually accomplishing what humanities aims to do, which is open discussions, which is to see how humans connect with each other. And So that's why we can have examples within a discussion, like what happened with the historical storytelling. I think when we have creation tales, when we have Jack tales, we have to have a starting point for some people. We would have to have snippets of Jack tales or creation tales within the discussion, but the majority of the time would have to be about the why, would have to be about the discussion. And I'm just excited. I'm not sure which one we should do next. Any thoughts? If you're out there and you're listening and thinking, you know what, this genre, this type of storytelling is intriguing to me, then put it out there and we'll put it on the list. And we'll the next step in a series like this is you have to always have someone who has a doctorate, and of course a doctorate that matches whatever that is in some way or form. So then you have to think, okay, if we have Jack tales, we have definitely a lot of wonderful storytellers who perform Jack tales, but could they academically discuss it and have the credentials to back it up? Big thing. And you could say, well, experience is helpful. Well, that's why you have a panel. On your panel, you can have a balance of the experience-based people. If they have, 20 plus, 30 plus years performing it, that's great. But if there's not the academic background, we need at least one person on the panel that has that. And I need to put a thing out there, announcement out there of who are my storytelling scholars? Who could I turn to who could help with creation tales, who could help with pourquoi tales, with Jack tales? I know that there are Appalachian studies, but doctorate level, do we have doctorate level? I know we have doctorate level for folklore, so we would be able to connect to several different types through that. Master's degrees, you could definitely have plenty of master's degrees, but I really would prefer doctorates. So if you're familiar with them, and the folktales meets humanities, which is, I think we have to break it down. There's so many kinds of folktales. I mean, we could, even within that, we could even be more specific. We could be like Celtic stories meets humanities. We could be, Latin American, tales, folk tales meets humanities. So I'm thinking it has to be even a little bit more specific, possibly. Now, historical storytelling was kind of broad, but if you noticed, we did focus a little bit more United States, but the panelists did bring up some things across the seas, like the Greeks were mentioned. There were some places in Africa that were mentioned, and I think some puppetry. So it wasn't just based in the United States, but the sense that I was getting, and especially the kinds of characters that our panelists performed, were much more American based. Yes, so super fascinating. And I'm looking at the time. I do want to have these chats to be a little bit shorter, but you always have to have a story. I'm just super thrilled. I am just super thrilled. Just a few more numbers before I tell a story to wrap this up. But I was noticing as we got closer and closer to the Big Y panel, the number of people who were visiting Story Crossroads website, and not only that, but specifically to the Big Y webpage. And it happened on the 20th, so this is just a couple days before. Now, Jim Luter was sending out emails to a whole bunch of humanities and history groups and communication groups. I had a lot of friends who were sharing it with people. Utah Humanities was really nice to share it with their social media plans. But the people who actually clicked or decided to go to the website, on the 18th, we had 73 people go to the website, 29 went to the Big Y webpage. On the 19th, the day before, we had 153 visit Story Crossroads, with 82 specifically going to the Big Y. And on the day of, we had 192 visit Story Crossroads, with 136 that specifically went to the Big Y. And then the day after, because it is something that people can watch, even if you missed the live stream, you can still watch it. We had 52 people come to the Story Crossroads website, and 21 specifically to the Big Y. So in just 4 days, we had 268 people visit. Now, did we have people visit the Big Y page before all of this? We definitely did. We definitely did. But our biggest surge, of course, was as we got closer. We noticed that was spectacular, too, where we had over 900 people on the day of the festival itself come to Story Crossroads website, and over 500 of that was specifically to the spectacular page. So it's fascinating. I love watching that because it's not numbers to me. I know that they're people. They're people like I know or I've seen them, whether it's live in person or I've seen them through Zoom. It's just exciting. It's like we're gathering. We can gather virtually. And that made me think of this story. It's not a developed story, but it's something that Sean Buvala reminded me of. He likes to put out little videos that focus on business, because he's really great with business and marketing. He also is a storyteller, so he merges those skills together. And he mentions that this is a time during this pandemic time to be brave, that we need to look at reinventing ourselves, and if things are not working, we need to be willing to change so that things can work. And there's a lot of us who have had to change. With Story Crossroads, we had to change. We didn't have a live festival. It was completely virtual. And he said that we need to put on our armor and we need to face and give a good fight. So I'm going to make up a story on the spot of what this reminds me of, inspired by Sean Buvala. So his name is spelled S-E-A-N-B-U-V-A-L-A. So I'm going to put it out there as a shout out to him. And you want to Google him and even put in storyteller in there. I think it's storyteller.net, but he also does morethanspeaking.com. So I think that will be another way to find him. But this happened in a village, and the people were very close. But one day, someone looked out their window and they saw something curled around the well. Now, it was the well where everyone loved to gather. People loved to talk there and sing songs and dance and sometimes jump off the ledge of the well, much to the chagrin of the parents, especially the mothers. But there was a dragon. Now, a dragon in and of itself is a mighty creature and would have people stand back, but this was a different kind of dragon. It didn't have such a shininess to its scales. It didn't have such a great fire, and yet you could tell that it still had some of that fire in its throat, even if it wasn't as big and as bold as another dragon, because this dragon was sickly. This dragon was ill. No one wanted to venture out of their homes. No one felt it was safe to go out. But there was one little girl who was really thirsty. She wanted some water from that well. She missed the coolness and she missed being able to chat with others. So she decided to go out, but she didn't just walk out. She looked inside her home and she found a scarf. And she took that scarf and she wrapped it around her head. And she walked ever so slowly towards the dragon. Now at this point, the dragon, being a sickly dragon, was sleeping. It seemed like it was always sleeping, always wrapping around that well. And the girl got closer and closer, but she didn't want to go too close. She was probably about 6 feet away when she finally yelled out, "Dragon! Dragon! Dragon! Why are you here? You're where we all like to be. We'd like to be able to gather again. Can you move?" But the dragon barely lifted up its head and just blared its nostrils a little bit and then rested its head back down. "Dragon, I know I can't get closer than you. I probably shouldn't get closer than 6 feet to you, but you still need to go. You need to go away." And the dragon just sat there, Well, this made that little girl so upset, and she stomped her foot, and as she stomped her foot, she could feel that the scarf that she had wrapped around her face loosened a little bit, and that got her all so nervous. She knew that that dragon had smoke, and she didn't want the smoke to get into her throat, and if the dragon was sick, who knows how easily she would get sick. And she took off running back into her home, and she stayed in her home for as long as she thought she could, maybe 5 minutes, because she was a little girl. She was still curious, even if she was a little upset. So she went out again, and she went slowly up to the dragon, and then she stopped about the same place, about 6 feet away from that dragon, and yelled out, "Dragon! Dragon, you need to go. Our village, we need this water, this well. We're gonna suffer because of this. You need to go away." And again, the dragon barely lifted its head, but this time at least flickered open one of its eyes and then closed it shut. And then harumphed, and some of the smoke went out, and all that smoke flying in the air that made the girl nervous, and she ran back home, and she stayed in her home as long as she could, as long as she thought that she could, until finally she went out, and you guessed it didn't take very long, maybe this time only 3 minutes. She had to do something. So this third time, she went over to the dragon, about 6 feet away, just as before. "Dragon, dragon, dragon, you have to go, you have to go. How long do you plan on being here?" And this time, the dragon opened both of its eyes, and in a very weak voice said, I don't know. Oh, I do not feel so good. But at least when I'm in this village, I know I'm near other people, other creatures, others who are breathing. I'm alone in that cave. I cannot stay in that cave alone." "But dragon, you're right by the water. Can you at least move a little bit?" "I don't think I have enough energy. I don't know how long." Well, with that answer, the girl had to think. They needed water. They always went to the well. That was always what they did. But is that what they always had to do? She thought about this, and she wondered who was the first person who had even made a well. Who had been that? It must have been generations before her, probably some great-great-great-great-great-grandfather or something. She didn't know. But then she had an idea. And she went from door to door, and she talked to people and said, "We need to do something else. There's a dragon, and he just needs to be near other creatures and people who breathe, and he doesn't want to be alone in this cave, but we need water. We need water. We can't just be closed down and scared and be in our homes this whole time. We need a new well. We need a new one. Where does water come from?" And there was one of the elders that said, I know. There's a spring. I remember there's a long time ago, someone was telling me about a spring in the mountains. And maybe if we could somehow figure out a way to bring that water from the mountains, we do not have to use that well. And so all the villagers planned and worked it out. And it took some time, but they were able to bring that water down to their village and not disturb that dragon. Now, I was never told how long that dragon stayed, whether it was 1 year, 2 years, or 3 years. But it didn't matter, because the villagers had discovered something else, and all because there was a little girl brave enough to face the dragon, ready to do the good fight that didn't have a single one killed. And so that is a story that I made up on the spot in honor of the pandemic. I'm sure you could hear a lot of connections with COVID-19 with 6 feet and being in our homes and such. And it was fun to play around. So thanks for playing around with me with a story like that. And we will continue doing streams So every Monday night, we're just going to do them from 9 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. Mountain Daylight Time. So nice and short. So it's usually towards 20 or 25 is when I'm probably going to share a story, whether it's a story made up on the spot, or a folk tale, or a personal tale, or whatever is inspired to happen. But in the meantime, I am so pleased with what we have been able to reinvent, to adapt, to change, so that storytelling can still be out there. And please do your best to make sure that stories still happen in your home or wherever you may be until we tell again.